Diana. I'm a DCE intern, which is a Director of Christian Education intern, which is like what Sarah does, but I work for an organization called Corrie's House. Has anybody ever heard of Corrie's House? Oh, that's awesome. Some of y'all have. That's really good. For those of you who haven't, you'll learn very soon. So, just to give you a warning, what we're talking about is uncomfortable and awkward and weird and heavy and a lot of confusing things all put together. And I know that and I understand that because I have felt all of those same emotions when learning about this. But it's also important that we know. So if at any time you are uncomfortable, you are welcome to step out of the room. You're welcome to go take a break, get a drink of water, things like that. If at any point you have questions, no matter how awkward or uncomfortable it is, you can ask me. I will answer anything. I'm not your parent, so it doesn't have to be weird or uncomfortable. And I want to encourage you to continue these conversations after I talk with your parents, with your friends, with Sarah, with people at your school or your church, because they are important conversations to have. Everybody ready to start? Yes. Awesome. Okay, the first question I have for you is, does anybody know how to define human trafficking? Can anybody take a guess? If you look at the words human and trafficking put together. Yeah, that is a beautiful definition. So human trafficking is the exploitation of people, the taking and selling of a human being for whether it's labor, whether it's sex, whether it's any time that they're gaining a service from somebody without the human receiving a payment. It's also commonly referred to as modern-day slavery. You all have probably learned in your history classes that slavery existed hundreds of years ago, but have you all ever learned that slavery is still here and thriving today? It's still happening here in the US, it's still happening here in the Twin Cities, and it's something we're going to talk about. So, while there are multiple kinds of human trafficking, like we talked about, I'm specifically going to talk about sex trafficking. So, sex trafficking involves three things. It involves force, fraud, and coercion. Can anybody tell me what force means? That's okay. Force is using violence in some way to force another person to do a sexual act. So it can be beating somebody or harming somebody or forcing somebody in that way. Does anybody know what fraud is? Yeah? Exactly. It's lying to a person or deceiving a person to make them believe something that's not true. So in some situations of sex trafficking, the person might believe that they're signing up for a job as a model. And so that would be a form of fraud, when instead of modeling, they're being sold for their bodies. And can somebody tell me what coercion is? Does anybody know? This is one that I didn't know. It's a hard word. Coercion is using threats to control somebody. So often what happens is a person is brought into the sex trafficking industry, as it's called, and they're brought in by force or fraud. So they might be brought in, a girl might be brought in because she's told that she's going to have a job as a model, which would be fraud. And then she is forced to, instead of having a job as a model, she is forced, using physical violence, to sell her body to somebody. And then coercion is threatening somebody to stay in. And so it might be saying, if you try to leave, I'm going to go hurt or kill your family members. And so sex trafficking can involve one or all three of these, or two. But it involves these things of any person, and then in exchange receiving a sexual act. That sexual act might be having sex with another person. It could be oral sex of some sort. It could be forcing somebody to film themselves doing pornographic things or sexual things. And these are all involved in and with sex trafficking. In addition to all of these things, any exchange of sex under the age of 18, so when a person is forced to sell themselves under the age of 18 or film themselves under the age of 18, is also included sex trafficking, regardless of if any force, fraud, or coercion can be proved. So any person under the age of 18 who is involved in this is considered a victim of sex trafficking. So, speaking of all of these things, now that you know what sex trafficking is, does anybody know what kind of people are being trafficked? Any guesses? Yeah. Exactly. Sex trafficking has no limits to who is being trafficked. They're trafficking males and females. They're trafficking people of every age, every ethnicity, every religion. It doesn't matter who. They're trafficking people who are just like people in this room. And there are all different kinds of people in this room of all different ages and genders. But one of the main ways that people find somebody to be trafficked or to traffic somebody is by finding somebody who's vulnerable. Does anybody know what vulnerable means? Yeah. Yeah, they could not be really aware. That's a vulnerability. A vulnerable, yeah?
Desperate.
Yeah, desperate. That's a vulnerability, or what vulnerable means. Somebody who's vulnerable could be somebody who doesn't have a home, a homeless person, or a person without a family, foster youth, or a huge vulnerable population. Vulnerable could mean it's somebody who doesn't have money to put food on their table. And so if somebody doesn't have money to feed their family, they're going to be a lot more vulnerable when somebody tries to offer them a job through fraud, right? Like we talked about. There are all different kinds of vulnerabilities, but even with all of these vulnerabilities, it can be anybody. And how are people being trafficked? So now that you know what sex trafficking is, and what kinds of people are being trafficked, how do you think somebody becomes trafficked? How many of y'all were told as a kid not to go in like a van with lollipops? You know, the creepy vans? Yeah, that's like a common thing, and I would never advise that. In fact, please do not do that ever. But that is not the only way that people are trafficked. We often hear scary stories of where it seems like somebody's going to kidnap you as you're walking, or things like that. But that's not the main way it is. The number one form of entering the sex trafficking industry is through an intimate partner. So what this means is it means somebody is pretending to be a boyfriend or a girlfriend, but often a boyfriend. And so what it starts out as is somebody who may be your age, maybe slightly older than you, is showing interest in you. And we all love when somebody shows interest in us. That's a natural human thing. We love to be loved. It's how we were created. We were created to be loved. And so when somebody expresses interest in you, that feels good, especially if you're vulnerable. And so it might be a guy over social media texting you, and it seems like nothing, but then over time, they become your boyfriend. And then maybe over time, it gets more serious, and in some situations, they might ask you to have sex with them. In some situations, they might ask you to move someplace with them. Sometimes it's still while you're here. But whatever it is, there comes a point where they start to say, you know, I really love you, but we're really having a tough time making ends meet. Can you just go do this favor for a friend for me? And they'll pay me a little bit, and then we'll be better. And just this one time. And so they ask you to go have sex with somebody, or to film yourself doing something sexual with somebody. And they say it's just one time, and then it's not just one time. Because once they've done it once, it just keeps happening over and over. So these intimate partner situations can be, they start out seemingly harmless, right? Just somebody who's interested in you, and then over time, that's what they become. The second way is familial, family. So with the familial way, what this means is it could be your dad or your mom, it could be your aunt or your uncle, your older brother or older sister. Somebody who's supposed to love you, who you're supposed to be able to trust, and actually abuses you or manipulates you or begins to sell you that way. The third way, like we talked about, is a job offer or an advertisement. So modeling or acting or, oh, you can be a travel agent if you move to this city, things like that. Posing as a benefactor, that means a person who, I looked up this definition so I can better explain it. A person who gives money to help a cause. Or the last way is false promises, like we've talked about, which is in with the fraud. And so these are all ways that a person could enter the industry, but like I said, it could happen to any of us, and it could be happening to people who are right around you. If it's a familial situation, you might not even know. It could be somebody in this room. And I hope and I pray that it's not, but it could be, because we don't know. Because in so many of these situations, a person can be trafficked, but they still continue to go to school, and they still continue to live their life, and nobody has any idea, because it's a process of building up. And so, you never know. So, we know that sex trafficking is forcing somebody to do sexual acts of some sort. And we know all of these things, how they're entering the industry. But if sex is sold, where is a person sex trafficked? Do y'all have any guesses? There are a few different places. There are places like brothels, which is literally a building where sex is sold, where people can go into, men and women, and buy an amount of time with another person. They go in and they see the girls or the guys, and they say, I want half an hour with that person. And so you walk into another room in that building. There's places that are like illicit massage places, parlors, where somebody thinks they're going to receive a massage. Or on the outside it looks like a massage parlor, but once somebody enters, they're receiving more than a massage. And usually the people who are entering know they're receiving more than a massage. There's places like online advertisements, where when somebody's scrolling through their phone, they see advertisements to purchase an amount of time with a person, or to watch videos of a person. And then with those, when you can purchase time with a person, you can literally buy time with a person and they will be delivered to your doorstep. Somebody drops them off, they perform the act, and then they leave. And then in other situations, people will be going on like a business trip or something like that, and they will have sex with a person in a hotel room or a motel room, where hardly anybody knows what's going on. This is a lot, and I know that it's a lot, and it's a lot to process all at once and a lot to hear. But one of the most important things to talk about is what is fueling the sex trafficking industry. Yeah? Money, yes, exactly. So, have you all learned about supply and demand in school? Yeah. Can somebody explain what supply and demand is? Not even related to trafficking. Yeah. Exactly. Anytime that there's a demand, oh, you can't see my arrows. This background is red, so there's white arrows that are pointing in a circle. Anytime that there is a demand for something, people come up with a supply, right? There was a demand to communicate better, so we came up with phones, right? There's a demand for more fast food, so they built a Chick-fil-A, right? Things like that. It's in every part of our world. But the thing with human trafficking is that there's a demand, and so we continue to have a supply of people. And the thing with a Chick-fil-A is, when you sell a sandwich, I worked at Chick-fil-A for a long time, okay? Coming as your Chick-fil-A expert, we don't get those sandwiches for free, right? So we sell it to you for $4.15. But it costs some money to buy the chicken from somebody else, right? And it costs some money to buy the bread, and it costs some money to buy all these things. And so our profit is only a much smaller amount than the $4.15. But if I'm selling a human, I can sell that same human over and over and over and over again, and I always receive 100% of the profit. Which means that it is a great business to be in if you want to make some easy money. Which is why people are in it. Because they can earn so much money off of it. But with that, there's a demand in our culture. And there's a demand for so many reasons. There's a demand to want this instant gratification and to not value other people. There's a demand to think that because we are human beings and because we were created with a sex drive that we deserve to have sex when we want, how we want. There's a demand to think that if we're sad, we deserve the pleasure of pornography. Pornography is fueling this demand. Pornography, this is my best definition. Pornography is any pictures, moving images, or videos of people with little to no clothes on, and may often include explicit sexual content or violence. Pornography is invading our culture, and it's everywhere, and it's been everywhere for years. Pictures, videos, moving images of people with little to no clothes on. 1 out of every 5 searches on Google involves pornography. Think about how many searches you do on Google a day. If you're anything like me as a student, you do a lot. And 1 out of every 5 is for pornography. 57% of teens are searching out pornography at least monthly. I'm here to tell you that pornography is a normal part of our culture. And the statistics show that if statistics are accurate, that there are people in this room that have viewed pornography. And that there are people in this room who are addicted to pornography. Because while our culture may say it's okay, pornography, your brain treats pornography the same way it treats a drug. And it becomes addicted. And it rewires the brain. Because when you view these images of people, or these videos of people, your body does receive pleasure from it. Because that's how we were created. We were created with this sex drive, right? And as middle schoolers, it makes sense that you have a lot of questions. You have a lot of questions about sex. You have a lot of questions about this age you're in and what your body is doing. And sometimes it's awkward to ask those questions, or you don't feel like you're getting answers. And so you look online without realizing what you're looking at. And then over time, you just keep looking. And so I'm here to tell you that it is normal if this is something you've seen. And it's normal if it's something you're struggling with. But just because it's normal does not mean it's okay. Right? And so if it's something you're struggling with, or if it's something you've seen, I want to encourage you to talk to somebody about it. talk to Sarah or any of the volunteers here. If you're a guy, talk to one of the guy volunteers. They both said that they would love to talk to you all about it. Talk to your pastor. Talk to your parents. It's okay to talk about it. And it's okay to admit if you've seen it. It's okay to admit if you're struggling with seeing it some more. Because 12 years old is the average age of first exposure to pornography. How many of y'all are 12? How many of y'all are older than 12? Yeah. That's most of y'all in this room, right? Are 12 or older. That's young, right? So, I want to take a break because I know this is a lot, and I know this is heavy, and I want to do a quick statistics game. Actually, we'll just do it sitting down. Does anybody have a guess for how many youth exchanged sex in Minnesota in 2019? Any number? Throw out a number.
32.
Good guess, Sarah.
500.
500. Good guess. 5,000 youth traded sex in Minnesota in the year 2019. What percentage of sex trafficking victims do you think are females? Yeah? 70%. Any other guesses? 80%? 96% of sex trafficking victims are females. What do you think the average age a victim is first sold for sex in Minnesota? What do you think? 13 years old. And how many children do you think are in the sex trade? In the world. 2 million. Approximately 2 million children. Last question. How much money is a person worth? How much money do you think a person pays for another human being? Oh, I accidentally clicked it. $90. $90 is the average cost of a slave. Average cost of money to buy a person. But I'm here to speak some truth and to speak some happy news in all of this. Because we know Genesis 1:27 says, oh, you cannot see this, sorry it's white, I'll read it. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Psalm 139 says, you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And 1 John 3:16 says, this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. So while all of these statistics are a lot, and you all just look overwhelmed, I'm here to tell you that despite what our world says, despite how the world says the average cost of a human is $90, that each and every one of you was made by God. We know this. Made by God, created from before you were born, and you're worth so much that you were worth Jesus coming to die for you. You're worth far more than $90. Your life has far more value because of who God claimed you to be. And so because of these things, we can respond to all of these terrible things we're hearing. Like I said, I work for Corrie's house. And what we're doing is we're working to open a home for girls that have been sex trafficked here in Minnesota. And so for girls 12 to 18, a safe place for girls to live where they can receive counseling and have a safe bed and be removed from this messy situation. But there's ways that you can respond to. This is not a portrayal of real love, but instead, you can keep learning. I gave you a glimpse. Took longer than I should have, I'm sorry. But I gave you a glimpse, but there's so much more information out there. You can continue to learn the signs of how to know if a person's being trafficked. You can continue to learn more about what organizations are doing here in Minnesota. You can can talk to Sarah, who's wearing a dress, every day for the month of December to raise awareness for what's happening, and she would love to tell you more. And with that, you can raise awareness. You can join Sarah in wearing a dress, or guys can wear a tie. Or you can talk to your friends about what's happening. You can post on your social media. Things like that. You can support Corrie's house. If you're still looking for some Christmas gift ideas, we sell stickers. We sell socks. And alpaca socks. And some fun stickers for on your water bottles that you can buy. You can help support other organizations like us who are here in the Twin Cities who are doing something. Or the most important way is you can pray, because we all know that this is a problem way bigger than we'll ever be able to solve on our own. So I want to encourage you all to be doing these things, to talk to me if you have more questions, to talk to your parents, and just to remember that we know that humans have value, and because we know that humans have value, remember that in the way you love people, the way you treat people, the way you value people. If you are being trafficked, or if you know somebody who's being trafficked, this is the National Human Trafficking Hotline where you can call and receive help or report a case. It's an important number to know. And then if you want to learn more, you can follow us on these social medias, or you can email me.